Hello, my name is Jason Stone, and I'm the co-designer of Fallen Flags, a new railroad game which is going to be published on the Game Crafter beginning on Monday, July the 11th, 2022. Fallen Flags is a deck-building game in which players acquire and play cards in an attempt to invest in the 4 early American railroads, build a railway network, and move trains across that network in order to score victory points and come out the winner at the game end. Points are scored both by railroad operations and by savvy investment in the stocks of those 4 railroads. For this video, I'm going to show you the game components and talk a little bit about how the game is played before I tell you how you can get your own copy from the Game Crafter starting on July the 11th. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using a rendering of the game on Tabletop Simulator. The physical copy will have some changes, but you'll get the essence of the game by seeing the video. Also, if you are interested in getting your own copy of the Tabletop Simulator module so that you can try the game out, all you have to do is go over to Steam, go to the Tabletop Simulator page, and then look up Fallen Flags in the workshop area, and you can get your own copy of the mod to try out the game. Let's take a look at the mod now so that you can see the game. Let's start with a discussion of the 3 boards used in this game. The main board in this game is the map board, which shows a portion of the northeastern and midwestern United States, 12 main cities served by the railroads of this game, and lines representing the track connections between those cities. The railroads used in this game are the Baltimore and Ohio, or B&O, which is depicted in blue, the Chesapeake and Ohio, or C&O, depicted in yellow, the New York Central, depicted in green, and the Pennsylvania Railroad, depicted in red. The lines bear the heralds of those railroads and represent loosely the historical routes that those companies took, and in the game, the placement of tracks will be subject to those routes. The home city of each of those railroads appears in its own color on the map. The second board used in this game is a combination stock track and scoring track. Around the outside of the board is the score track. Players will be tracking points they earn for building track and running trains along that track throughout the game. In the middle of that board is the stock track, which covers both the purchase price for stock in each of the 4 railroads, as depicted as the money amounts in the middle, and bonuses awarded to players who have the most stock in each railroad at the end of the game. That is depicted on the right-hand side of that table. We'll talk in more detail about some of the elements of each of those, but that is the second board. The third board is administrative. It's used to house the train tokens and the track tokens. The train tokens are put on the board as soon as a railroad opens and will be moved during the game in train runs, which represents the delivery of cargo and passengers in the game. The track tokens are self-explanatory. There are additional elements to each board, which I will discuss a little later. The cards of Fallen Flags drive the action of the game, and they provide resources, represented by the hammer and wrench symbol, capital, depicted as dollar amounts, and card actions, which are depicted by a variety of symbols. There are 6 types of cards in the game. The players will begin the game with a combination of stock, cash, and depot cards. Stock cards are used to allow a railroad to lay track or run trains. Each player will start with 2 separate stock cards, and they will have the ability to purchase additional cards during the game. It should be noted that unlike some games, players do not represent individual railroads in Fallen Flags. Instead, all of the players collectively own stock in the 4 railroads, and possession of a stock card gives a player a right to take an action on behalf of the listed railroad. The cash cards provide 1 capital to a player, or provide a trash action, which we'll describe a little later. The depot card works the same way, except it offers 1 resource. The remaining 3 types of cards are shuffled together into a market deck, from which each player purchases 1 card each turn. There are 4 cards for each city on the map, and those cards provide a combination of capital, resources, and/or card actions. Investor cards provide capital and/or the opportunity to draw additional cards. There are 3 types of tycoons, which provide capital, resources, or card actions, or the opportunity to draw additional cards. A player's turn in Fallen Flags takes several steps. The player first draws a hand of 5 cards from their personal deck. Once those cards have been drawn, the player plays them in any order, with a goal of causing railroad actions and acquiring capital to purchase cards. Once the player has played all their cards, they combine all capital amounts showing on the cards. They may then purchase a stock card if they have sufficient capital to do so. But whether they do that or not, they must purchase 1 card from the market deck. Once card purchases are complete, all cards played and purchased are discarded to the player's discard pile. We'll discuss all of these actions in more detail. Let's pick apart the turn you just saw. Remember that the primary way to score points in Fallen Flags is to conduct railroad actions, namely to build track and to conduct train runs. The player decided to build track for the Pennsylvania Railroad. To do that, the player played a Pennsylvania Railroad stock card and 2 depot cards, which provided 2 resources. To build any track in this game, the player must have 2 resources available to go along with the card initiating the railroad action. Because the Pennsylvania Railroad had no track on the board at this point, the first track build is to put the train token for the Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh, which is the home city. When a railroad is started in this manner, its stock value goes up 1 space on the stock track, and the player scores the point value for the city listed for that city on the board. So, the player scored 2 points for building track in Pittsburgh, and the Pennsylvania Railroad moved forward 1 space on the stock track. Once a railroad has started, all subsequent builds must connect to the home city or to track already laid by the railroad. A railroad must lay its track on lines bearing the herald of that railroad. For your convenience, those heralds are all appropriately color-coded. Each track build costs 2 resources in addition to the stock card for that railroad. It must be noted that once a railroad has started, a railroad action to build track may also be instigated by playing a city card for the city that is being built to. So, for example, once the train token had been placed in Pittsburgh, the player could choose to play a city card for Columbus, if he or she had one, in lieu of playing a Pennsylvania stock card. Each build scores the points shown for the city. So Columbus would be worth 2 points, Cincinnati would be worth 2 points, and the track leading to St. Louis would score 3 points. In addition to that, every other track build after the first one increases the stock value of that railroad by 1 space. The second type of railroad action is the train run. Once a railroad has started and has laid track, a player may play a stock card plus cards totaling 1 resource for each space the train will move to move that train over an equal number of track pieces to a new destination. Once that is accomplished, the player scores 1 point for every space the train moved, plus 1 point for conducting the train run. As you see here, the train moved from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati and thus required 2 resources. As is the case with building track, a player may, in lieu of playing a stock card, play a city card, provided that that card is for the city to which the train will move. For example, had the player possessed a Cincinnati city card, he or she could have played it to move the train to Cincinnati instead of playing the Pennsylvania stock card. Let us return to the example that I showed earlier. Once the player played the train token to Pittsburgh, the only cards remaining in the player's hand were 2 cash cards worth 1 capital apiece. It should be noted that all cards in the game have 2 sides, and generally a player has free choice as to which side to play. Accordingly, the player could have chosen to have played one of the cash cards on its trash side. When a player trashes a card, the card is permanently removed from the game, and a player gets another draw from their personal draw deck. However, the player chose not to do that and kept both of the cash cards in order to have capital to purchase cards. Earlier in this example, I pointed out that players generally can play a card on either side. There is one exception for city cards. If a city is not connected to track by any railroad, the side of the card that states "when connected" cannot be played. Note that should Columbus be connected, as was the case in our extended example, both sides of the Columbus card could be played. Otherwise, only the card allowing a card draw would be playable. Once a player has played all of their cards and taken all of their railroad actions, the card purchase phase begins. This phase has 2 parts. First, the player may purchase a stock card, provided that he or she has played sufficient cards to have enough capital to purchase the card. The stock price is based on the location of the railroad's cube on the stock track. If a player purchases a stock card, they simply add it to their discard pile, and the price of the stock goes up 1 space on the stock track. Remember, however, in our example, the player did not have sufficient funds. Whether or not the player purchases a card, the second half of the card purchase phase is the purchase of a card from the market deck, which is mandatory. The player draws a number of cards equal to the capital value of their cards, less any capital spent on stock cards, and purchases one of those cards, discarding the other one. If a player does not have sufficient capital to purchase a card from the market deck, either because they had no capital in their cards played or they spent all of their capital purchasing a stock card, the player must take a loan for 2 capital. The price of this loan is 1 victory point. If a player's score marker reaches or passes an hourglass space on the scoring track, an event is triggered. Beginning with the next player in turn order, an event card is in play for an entire round. Every player who meets that condition at the start of their turn gets the bonus indicated. At the end of the round, that card is discarded. In other words, each player gets a chance to qualify. The game ends at the end of a round when one player has reached the score level required to end the game. At that time, each player sorts out their stock cards and option cards, which are the cards for the home cities of the railroads. The player with the most stock and option cards of each railroad scores a bonus based on the position of that railroad's cube on the stock track. For example, the B&O would pay 4 points to the player who had the most stock and option cards at the end of the game. The second most stockholder would get 2 points. All ties are friendly. Highest score wins. I don't have time to go into some of the other rules, but I hope that this gives you an overview of Fallen Flags. Make sure to get your copy of Fallen Flags from the Game Crafter. The crowd sale begins on July 11th and will run for 30 days. The more people who order, the cheaper the per order cost will be. Make sure to let everyone know about it, and I thank you for your support.